falan. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the 6th International Day of the Girl Conference held online for the first time this year. We are approximately 1,000 registered participants in a live broadcast from Doğan Holding building. And we are also happy to be with our viewers who are participating in our live broadcast on YouTube channels. I would like to welcome you all to our broadcast. Well, since 2012, October 11th has been celebrated as International Day of the Girl in order to prevent discrimination against girls and ensure that they exercise all human rights equally. This special day emphasizes the gender inequality that girls face all over the world. And in Turkey, the International Day of the Girl Conference has been with the joint forces of United Nations, Aydın Doğan Foundation, UNICEF, UNFPA, and UN Women became an award-winning international platform that has been growing every year. 2020 went down in history as a year in which the world changed rapidly. According to the research conducted in this process, girls and women are the most affected by this change. The negative repercussions of climate change, forced migration, poverty, and disasters make girls more vulnerable to risks such as violence, child marriage, and dropping out of the school. And global epidemics and pandemics such as COVID-19 also affect these negative results at a very high level. For this reason, we will discuss the gender-based obstacles faced by women and the girls due to global pandemic and any risks posed by climate change in our conference with the theme of Being a Girl in a Changing World this year. We will discuss what role girls can play as actors of change in the face of such challenges. Distinguished guests from our country and different parts of the world, young people, and many prominent names that we all know will share their special feelings and thoughts with us. Also, all throughout the conference, please do not forget to leave your comments and questions on our chat pod. For our viewers who would like to share on social media, our hashtags are International Girl Children's Day Conference and hashtag Strong Girls, Strong Futures. I do wish everyone a day for inspiration by these important issues. Now, if you wish, let's start our conference with our first guest. I would like to give the word to Vusat Doğan Sabancı, Vice President of Aydın Doğan Foundation. Now, okay. Hi, everyone. Today, as Aydın Doğan Foundation, we are celebrating the 6th edition of the International Day of the Girl 2020. And once again, to offer a young, bright future for the girls and for us who are working for the gender equality, has brought together many of us, UNICEF, UNFPA, and UN Women and their distinguished representatives who are our partners, everyone who worked very hard for the organization, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you all. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, actually this has been a very challenging this year, which is going to be simply written down in the history, and we are simultaneously experiencing this as the whole global population. Actually, the virus is only weighing a number of grams, but it is having repercussions on the whole world. In a number of weeks, it has simply confined 2 billion people into their houses. Consumption and production have been at the lowest levels. $20 trillion of resources have been utilized in a simply mere number of days. Hundreds of thousands of companies simply went bankrupt, and hundreds of thousands of people simply were laid off because of the pandemic. But despite all these negativities, actually, 75% of the global air population has been simply cleared in a number of weeks. So in summary, with the global pandemic, our lives will completely change. So what do these changes mean for the girls and the women? Let's have a look at those facts. So throughout this pandemic, where simply people were confined in their houses, violence against women and children, unfortunately, escalated. And in some regions, this was as high as 30%. And unfortunately, for many households, there were the sexual abuse, which was significantly increased. And women and girls who were exposed to sexual abuse and violence because of the pandemic conditions were confined under the same roof with the perpetrators, with the people who actually abused them. So, like house care and some house chores and care, which are sort of actually to a great extent were unpaid work, were simply left to the responsibility of women. For example, in Turkey, women, compared to men, they were involved in unpaid work by 4 times higher than the men. And the number of women who were simply laid off is significantly higher compared to the number of men. And when we look at the research, because there has been a tendency to stay away from education, the early and forced marriages also surge in terms of number. So, dear guests, within the scope of International Day of the Girl conference, we will be talking about the impact of such phenomena, such as the climate change or the pandemic on the women and girls. But it's not going to be only a negative scene as such. How simply girls and women could be empowered so that they could assume their own responsibilities as actors of change. Aydan Doğan Foundation, with its very valuable and precious stakeholders, is happy and honored to be a part of this change, particularly education and particularly the education of girls has been one of always the top priorities and main focal points of our foundation. The support, through the support and the incentives which we offer for the education, we are not only contributing to the development and reinforcement of the Turkish economy, but also making sure that girls and young women simply participate as actors of change into this industry. So not only throughout their education, but girls are not left alone in the aftermath of their education. So we are always there to support them physically, financially, or any other type of support. For 25 years, we have been simply working without any stop because as Aydan Doğan Foundation, Doğan Foundation and Doğan family, we simply believe that it is actually our way of simply paying it back to this society. Well, dear guests, we are all simply aiming towards a world where there is no gender-based violence or discrimination against girls and women. Even though, there are some barriers such as the pandemics, but let's not forget that this is a marathon and, let's never give up, simply taking the huge strides. I would like to wish everyone a very effective, very productive and enjoyable conference. Thank you so much. Vuslat Hanım, thank you so much. Well, actually, we heard Vuslat Doğan Sabancı, how pandemic and the climate change is simply having its repercussions on all of our lives, economy, education, and particularly the lives of girls, and how they can simply survive the impacts of this crisis. Now, we are going to simply get connected to Nona Zickerman on behalf of UNICEF, the UNICEF Turkish representative. Well, thank you.
Vuslat Doğan Sabancı, Vice President of Aydan Doğan Foundation, Ms. Louisa Neubauer, Climate Activist and Youth Champion, distinguished attendees, dear children, and dear viewers who are connecting from Turkey and around the world, good afternoon. On behalf of UNICEF, I am very pleased to welcome you today for the 9th International Day of the Girl Child in collaboration with Aydan Doğan Foundation, UNFPA, and UN Women. I would like to thank our partners and co-organizers for their continued commitment to the empowerment of women and girls in Turkey and around the world. Being an adolescent girl in a changing world, the theme of today's event, provides us with an opportunity to reflect on the rapidly changing environment that we live in. Climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic are some of the key challenges that we are currently facing, and we know that children bear a disproportionate share of the burden imposed by these crises, which are putting their health and well-being at risk. As a result of climate change, a child born today could be living in a world with an average temperature that is 4 degrees warmer by their 71st birthday. Nearly a quarter of all children in the world will be living in areas with extremely limited water resources by 2040. Climate-related displacement and migration brings increased vulnerability, including separation from family members and exposure to violence, exploitation, and abuse. Girls are at a particularly increased risk of violence and exploitation in crisis settings, including the risk of child marriage and child labor. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated persistent inequalities all over the world, including gender inequality. Key actions taken to control the spread of the virus, such as school closures, temporary disruption of essential services, closure of businesses, and lockdowns, have had tremendous effects on the lives of women and girls. At the height of the pandemic lockdowns, schools were closed in 192 countries, affecting 1.6 billion students. It is estimated that lockdown-related disruptions could lead to 7 million additional unintended pregnancies, an additional 31 million cases of gender-based violence, and an additional 13 million child marriages over the next 10 years. As a mother of 2 girls, I can say that these are very frightening statistics. And behind these statistics are stories of real girls. As Sangamitra, a 15-year-old girl from India, said, "Many parents don't have a job or money for school fees, so they have started planning to send their children to work. In the case of girls, they may plan to marry them off at an early age." Angela, a 17-year-old girl from Mozambique, told us, "Previously, I would spend my time at school, where I received education and training on girls' rights. Due to the coronavirus, this has stopped. I no longer have access to this support, which kept me informed." But while noting the adverse impacts of climate change and COVID-19 on girls, let us also remember that girls can and do play an important role in overcoming these challenges, and that we must include, involve, and engage them as part of the solution to the problems that we face. We must ensure that all girls have an equal say in the decisions that affect their lives, their health, their environment, and their future. For this, access to universal and quality education that equips both girls and boys with 21st century skills in science, technology, engineering, math, and the arts are more important than ever. On this special day, let us reiterate our joint commitment to support women and girls to realize their full potential and contribute to a more equal world. Today, girls from Turkey and around the world will be sharing their visions and their inspiring experiences with us. I believe these discussions are an important contribution to help us reimagine and rebuild a better future for all of us. Distinguished attendees and viewers, I would like to end my remarks by calling upon all organizations and every member of society to work together to support adolescent girls and boys in overcoming these crises. We will get through this together for every child. Thank you.
Sayın Nona Zickerman'a da
Thank you very much, Nona Zickerman, for your speech. As she underlined in her speech, climate change and pandemic has a lot of effects on the lives of girls and children in general. So we have to involve them in the decision-making mechanisms and solutions of the problems. Now, I'm very excited to give the floor to young people. Our friends are going to explain us what they have done concerning how to break the barriers before the girls. Let's listen.
Herkese merhaba. Aydın Doğan Vakfı, UNICEF, UNFPA ve UN Women tarafından her yıl düzenlenen Dünya Kız Çocukları Günü konferansı kapsamında Bu sene Haziran ayından bu yana iklim değişiklikleri ve küresel salgının kız çocukları ve kadınlar üzerindeki etkileri konusunda hep birlikte çalışıyoruz. Bizler farklı arka planlardan gelen ve fakat geleceklerimiz ve dünyanın geleceği konusunda ortak hayalleri olan 111 genç ve çocuk olarak düşüncelerimizi, önerilerimizi ve eleştirilerimizi sizlerle paylaşmak için buradayız.
Tüm çalışmalarımızı kurumların sosyal iletişim ağlarından ulaşabileceğiniz bir link ile sizlerin ziyaretine sunuyoruz. Şimdi, iklim değişikliği ve küresel salgınlar karşısında adil, eşit bir dünya için önerilerimizi, ürettiklerimizi sizlerle paylaşmak istiyoruz.
İklim değişikliği konusunda zorunlu eğitim müfredatına yer verilmesi gerektiğini düşünüyoruz. Öğrencilerin konu hakkındaki farkındalığını ve motivasyonunu arttırmak için çeşitli etkileşim projeleri, yarışmalar ve etkinlikler düzenlenmelidir. İklim değişikliğiyle mücadelemizin güçlenmesi için toplum olarak daha çok bilinçlenmemiz gerektiğine inanıyoruz. Ailelerimize su ve enerji tüketimi, geri dönüşüm gibi konularda dikkat çağrısında bulunuyoruz. İklim değişikliği etkileri ve sonuçları hakkında kamu spotu içeriklerinin çarpıcılığını ve sıklığının arttırılmasını istiyoruz.
Biz herkes için iklim adaletine inanıyoruz. Başta kız çocukları ve genç kadınlar olmak üzere herkesin iklim değişikliği hakkında bilinçlendirilmesine, kurumların değişiklik nedeniyle olumsuz etkilenen kişileri tanıdığı imkan ve desteklerin artırılması gerektiğini düşünüyoruz. İklim adaletinin sağlanması için tüm kurum ve kuruluşların daha etki odaklı çalışmasını bekliyoruz. Kurumların geri dönüşüme teşvik edici sistemler ve ödüller tasarlamasını, ürünlerin çevre dostu olduğunu sertifikalarla göstermesini, yenilenebilir ve temiz enerji kaynaklarını önermelerini talep ediyoruz.
Sağlık hakkında erişimin herkes için kolay olmasını istiyoruz. Bireylerin dil engeline takılmaması için farklı dillerden oluşan çağrı merkezleri, ambulans ve hastaneye erişimi için kullanımı kolay uygulamaların önemli olduğunu düşünüyoruz. Pandemi döneminde sağlık sektöründe yer alan, gece gündüz çalışan, ailelerinden uzak kalarak büyük fedakarlıklar yapan herkese çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Tüm çocuklar ve gençler sesimizi özgürce duyurmak istiyoruz. Güncel sorunları tartışabileceğimiz platformlar kurulmasını, özellikle kız çocuklarının seslerini yükseltmek için çocuk hakları komitelerine katılımın teşvik edilmesini talep ediyoruz.
Küresel salgın döneminde de sosyalleşme ihtiyacımız var. Yaşa, cinsiyete, dil farklılıklarına göre grupların oluşmasına hem iletişim ve etkileşimin sağlanabileceği hem de hareket ederek sağlığa katkıda bulunacak spor, egzersiz, dans ve buna ek olarak engelli arkadaşlarımızın da unutulmadığı etkinliklerin düzenlenmesine ihtiyacımız var.
Biz aldığımız eğitimin herkes için ulaşılabilir, eşit ve güncel bilimsel bilgiye dayalı olmasını istiyoruz. Okula gönderilmeyen kız çocukları, çocuk işçiler ve salgın döneminde eğitimde güçlük yaşayan tüm çocuk ve gençlerin eğitimden uzak kalmaması için ailelerin bilinçlendirilmesi, ailelere gereken desteğin yapılması gerektiğini düşünüyoruz.
Mülteci veya değil, engeli olan ya da olmayan.
Çocuk yaşta çalışmak zorunda bırakılan.
Çocuk yaşta evlendirilen,
Kız ya da oğlan, tüm çocuklar ve gençler
dinlenmeli, ihtiyaçlarına kulak verilmelidir.
Ancak bu şekilde daha adil, daha eşit ve
Daha sürdürülebilir bir yaşam sağlanabilir.
Katkısı olan bütün
Well, I would like to congratulate all of my young friends who made a contribution. Well, it is possible to simply watch all the videos prepared by children and our young friends, as well as the other productions such as posters, photographs, under simply at the bottom of the screen. Distinguished guests, we have a guest speaker who takes the issues that touch the health of our world, such as climate change and pandemics, as a mission. I would like to bring distinguished Louisa Neuber simply to your attention. Louisa is a climate activist born in 1996, one of the founders of Fridays for Future, an international youth action which draws attention to climate change. Now, well, this is the duty of all humanity, Louisa says, and we're listening to you.
The introduction, I didn't understand a word, but I suppose it was nice. Thank you so much for having me today. I feel honored to be speaking here today. I'm speaking today from Germany, where I grew up. I grew up in Hamburg as a very lucky girl. I grew up in an affluent neighborhood, surrounded mostly by white people, parents who loved me, and a family that made me feel safe. When I was younger, when I was a girl child, all I wanted to become was a teacher. Since all of the working women around me were teachers, this was the perspective that was shown to me as a young girl growing up in a rich country in the 21st century. And just sometimes I wished I was a man, because apparently men could be funny, and I'd like the idea of being a funny person too. Yet all the people that I knew were funny were just men. So growing up in the 21st century in a rich country, humor was something that was special for men. And growing up in a rich country in the 21st century, in an affluent and white neighborhood, I was told I could become anything if I learned enough and I studied hard enough, and if I did my homeworks and my tasks. That was the world vision I had when I grew up. When I grew up and nobody was telling me about the climate crisis and about the fact that while telling me I could become anything, people were destroying my future and my future perspectives and the presence of the girls all around the world. Learning about the climate crisis changed everything for me. It didn't only change the way I looked around and understood what we were doing to living nature every single day, but it also unraveled that lie I had been living with, that lie about my future possibilities, about the opportunities I would have, and about that simple solution: if you only worked hard enough, you could become anything as a girl. And this is not only true in the light of the climate crisis, but this is wrong given that there's no girl in the world that had the same rights as her brother, and that there's no man around the world that is equal to his wife, and that there is no girl even today being born knowing that she would have the same perspective as the boys around her. The combination of the discrepancy between genders, as well as the climate crisis that is increasing that every single day, that gap that is discriminating girls around the world, is making it impossible for people like me, for women like me, for girls like I used to be, to grow up in a free world. When I learned about the climate crisis and I understood what it meant that my future was being taken away from me, while my parents told me I could become anything, I got angry. And that was new, because girls don't get angry, girls do their homework. And I found it unfair that my future was being treated that way. And that is also something that you don't do as a girl. You don't find things unfair, because growing up in a rich nation in the 21st century in an affluent white neighborhood, things aren't usually unfair for you. And yet again, it was a privilege to only realize it then. Knowing about the climate crisis made me angry. It made me feel like the world was unfair. And it took away that sentiment of safety that I had as a privileged young girl growing up. It was my safe harbor being taken away from me. Knowing about the climate crisis was the first time that I wasn't okay with how things went, with how politics treated our environment and our climate, and how adults and politicians were dealing with my and our common future. Learning about the climate crisis made me so angry that eventually I started organizing the Fridays for Future in Germany and later Europe and now worldwide. The situation of girls in the 21st century worldwide is a very special one. And there are two ways people discuss the role of girls nowadays. One is pity, because girls around the world, no matter where they are hit harder than their male counterpart. And there is glorification, because people are celebrating what girls are doing today, for instance, as climate activists. Yet both pity and glorification won't bring us anywhere. As long as people respect the work of the girls, the speeches of the girls, the activities of the girls, the way the girls organize climate justice action, the way the girls stand up for their rights, as long as that is only respected while we keep on going like before, while people keep on going, stealing their future, this is not respect. This is, in fact, glorification and disrespect at the same time. Respecting a girl and respecting what a girl is doing in the light of the climate crisis today means standing up and acting. As the respect and the nice words and the picture opportunities won't save the girls' futures. Only action will solve that. So at this day, at this International Day of the Girl Child, the question I ask is not what is the role of the girl child, but what should be the role of everyone else. If you truly respect what girls around the world are doing, you start organizing, you start doing whatever you can to make the future of all those girls a safe one and a lucky one. If you truly respect the girls out there, if you truly respect the rights of those girls out there, you don't just say, well done, and keep going. You start acting. In today's world, in a patriarchal world, the rights of the girls worldwide are imbalanced. And the opportunities that girls worldwide have to change things are so much smaller than of those who are in power today. Eventually, it is ignorant to tell girls how you respect the world, their work, without doing everything you can to truly protect them and their futures. So I do believe that this day, if this day is around the girls, if it's about the lives and the future and the right of the girls worldwide, it's a call to action for everyone else. When I was growing up in a rich country in the 21st century, in a white and affluent neighborhood, I had no idea how my future was being treated back then. And I had no idea that when people told me I could become anything I wanted, they were in fact not telling me the truth. Yet I wish for every single girl worldwide that is growing up today to get that feeling at some point and to know that their future is in safe hands because we are taking care of that. That is not a job for girls and younger generations. This is a job for humanity. And it is humanity that is asked right now to stand up for the girls and for everyone else. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Louisa, for this eye-opening speech. It was really valuable for us that you participated today.
The work you have done is very important for our world and also for the future generations. I told you that a lot of familiar faces will be with us today, so we will listen to the messages recorded by them and by young people as well.
Küresel iklim değişikliği ve salgınlar gibi olayların getirdiği zorluklar karşısında değişen dünyada kız çocuklarının nasıl mücadele ettiklerini ve ayakta kalabildiklerini konuşacağız. Kız çocuklarının ayrımcılığa uğramadığı, eşit haklara ve fırsatlara sahip olduğu bir dünya yaratmak için 11 Ekim'de Dünya Kız Çocukları Günü konferansında buluşuyoruz. Çocukların ve gençlerin kendi topluluklarına etkin katılımları çok önemlidir. Gelin kız ve oğlan çocuklarını ve gençleri dinleyelim. İklim değişikliği ve salgınlar gibi hepimizi etkileyen küresel zorluklara çözüm bulmak için onları güçlendirelim. Kız çocuklarının ihtiyaçlarını kendilerinden dinleyelim, onları çözümün bir parçası haline getirelim. Herkesi kız çocuklarının katılım hakkını desteklemeye davet ediyorum.
Yeni dünya düzeninde gençleri ilgilendiren konularda gençlere de söz hakkı verilmesini istiyoruz.
Devletin küresel salgınlarda yapacağı yardımlarda fırsat eşitliğinin gözetilmesini istiyoruz.
Yeni dünya düzenimizde ev içerisinde de toplumsal cinsiyet eşitliğinin gözetilmesini istiyoruz.
Kriz dönemlerinde doğru ve nitelikli bilgiye erişebilmek istiyoruz.
Küresel bir salgın yaşandığı zaman kriz yönetimini öğrenebileceğimiz farkındalık eğitimleri istiyoruz.
Eğer çocuksanız konuştuğumuzda ciddiye alınmazsınız.
Merhaba, ben Bahar Toksoy Guidetti. Kız çocuklarına yönelik ayrımcılık, dışlama, fırsat eşitsizliğini ortadan kaldırmaya katkı sağlamak amacıyla bundan 2 sene önce Bitlis'e köy okullarındaki kız çocuklarına voleybol öğretmeye gittim. Gün boyunca hevesle ve mutlulukla antrenman yapan kızlarımızdan biri ayrılma vakti geldiğinde yanıma gelip "Keşke gelmeseydiniz" dedi. Ne diyeceğimi, ne yapacağımı bilemedim. Ama o devam etti. "Bahar abla, seni tanıdıktan sonra senin gibi bir sporcu olmayı daha çok ister oldum. Ama biz burada bırak antrenman yapmayı, dışarı bile çıkamıyoruz. Bugün buraya zar zor izin alarak geldik. Ve şimdi siz geldiniz, bizi heveslendirdiniz. Gidiyorsunuz, bir daha da arayıp sormayacaksınız" dedi. Çevreme baktığımda diğer kızlarda da aynı buruk bakışları gördüm. Bundan 20 yıl sonra kızımın bana gelip "Anne, ortada böyle bir problem vardı ve sen hiçbir şey yapmadın mı?" deme ihtimali gözümün önüne geldi. O gün onlara sadece voleybol öğretmenin, ilham kaynağı olmanın, cesaretlendirmenin yeterli olmadığını anladım. Çünkü potansiyellerini gerçekleştirmelerinin önündeki en büyük engel toplumsal cinsiyet eşitsizliğiydi. Kız çocuklarını istedikleri her alanda başarılı olabilecekleri şekilde donanımlı hale getirecek bir akademi kurmaya karar verdim. Bu akademide sadece spor değil, doğa, bilim, sanat alanlarındaki eğitimlerle farklı meslek gruplarına olan ilgilerini çekmek, özgüvenlerini arttırmak, hayal kurmak, hedef koymak ve keşfetme becerilerini geliştirmeyi hedefledik. Erkek egemen meslek gruplarında başarılı olmuş iş kadınlarıyla bir araya getirerek önlerine çıkabilecek engelleri nasıl aşacaklarını öğretiyoruz. Bu arada bana keşke gelmeseydiniz diyen kızımızı soracak olursanız, tanışmamızdan yalnızca 6 ay sonra hayatında ilk defa İstanbul'a geldi ve düzenlediğimiz kampa burslu olarak katıldı. Onu orada ağırlamak, kariyerim boyunca kazandığım en büyük şampiyonluktan bile daha değerliydi benim için. Bu kadar kısa sürede kat ettiğimiz yola dönüp baktığımda çok önemli bir şey görüyorum. Bir kız çocuğu için küresel salgın, iklim değişikliği gibi olumsuz şartlarda büyümek çok daha zor. Ama zorluklar ne kadar büyük olursa olsun ben tek başıma neyi değiştirebilirim ki dememek lazım. Küçük ama sürekliliği olan adımların etkisi tahmin edemeyeceğimiz kadar büyük oluyor. O yüzden gelin bugünden itibaren hep birlikte daha fazla sorumluluk alalım. Güçlü kızlar, güçlü yarınlar için.
Katılımları
A big thank you to our guests who underlined the need for a brighter future for girls. Now, I would like to give the floor to Deputy Representative of UNFPA, Ms. Zeynep Başarankut. I'm a proud ambassador of UNFPA. Now we're listening to her. Hello, thank you very much, Hazal. Thank you very much for your kind words and for your support. As a family of UNFPA, we are very happy that you're our ambassador because we will reach out a bigger group thanks to your help. Distinguished guests, as UNFPA, for the past 50 years, we are working for a world in which every pregnancy is planned and wanted, and we are working for girls and vulnerable populations as well as others. We would like to help those people to have a safe and equal life and leave no one behind. That's why today is very important for us. Today is the 11th of October, Day of the Girl Child. And for one more day, we would like to work harder for a world where there is no discrimination and exclusion for girls. So during the crisis situations such as COVID-19, the gender inequality is exacerbated because poverty increases and violence increases, and girls, women are affected the most. So in every 6 months period of the crisis situation of pandemic, the cases increase. And there are also other cases which are increasing, such as child marriages. According to the same research, 13 million children will have early marriage due to the crisis, and 90% of early marriages affect girls. This Sunday, 33,000 girls will be forced to marry a man who is older. So 1 out of 5 women in Turkey got married before 18, and half of the Syrian refugees in Turkey and the women in this population got married early. So this leads to child mothers. So 1/3 of early marriages lead to early motherhood, and they have a violence rate of more than 48%, which is higher than the average. And among Syrian girls, for minor Syrian girls, we can say 50% of them who are married already are pregnant or they have babies. So early pregnancies are very dangerous, both for the baby and also for the girl. UNFPA has a report. According to that report, in early marriages, in addition to infant and mother mortality, there are other problems such as lethal bleeding and higher exposure to STDs and a lot of health-related problems and complications. Unfortunately, girls between 15 and 19 across the world has a fatality cause of early pregnancies. We also talk about family planning. According to UNFPA projections, due to the pandemic, 7 million unwanted pregnancies will take place, and 47 million young women will not have access to modern family planning methods. Finally, something very important, I would like to talk about education. We would like to save girls from poverty. We need to help them for empowerment. We need to provide them access to healthcare education. And to solve all these problems, we have one important thing, that's education. But during the pandemic, that was also affected as well. These are the important risks that we should all be aware of, and we all need to be engaged in efforts for outreach activities. Public, private sector, the society actors, and also NGOs should come together and work together. UNFPA is going to continue working in order to ensure access to healthcare, in order to support girls and women for equal rights. For many years in 30 provinces, through the mobile teams, UNFPA has offered services to refugees, Turkish nationals, girls, and young women, as well as population under risk. So we are working for their empowerment. We have service providers who we are supporting in various sectors, and we also offer our help for their in-service trainings. So in the last 5 years, we trained more than 1 million Syrian and Turkish girls and young women, and we have worked also with the private sector partners such as Aydın Doğan Foundation. And we are also working towards a better future. Before I conclude, I would like to celebrate this important day for the girl child, and I also would like to thank Aydın Doğan Foundation. Azize, I would like to conclude with Azize's words. Thank you very much. I have a dream. I want to live a peaceful life, and I want friendship, and I want everyone to live in friendship. I want everyone to be happy and free. Everybody should be equal. Boys and girls should be equal. There should not be a divide between the poor and the rich. I want everyone to be equal, and I want a beautiful world for everyone. Thank you very much, Deputy Representative of UNFPA, Zeynep Başaran Kutkan. Thank you very much for the striking figures you have shared with us. As you stated, young people and women should lead an equal and healthy life. And in order for that, all groups of society should work together and cooperate to achieve this goal. The first panel is next. So we are going to talk about how climate change and pandemic impacted the lives of girls and young people. The moderator will be Melis Alpan, journalist and author. Over to you, Melis, to moderate the session. Distinguished members of audience, distinguished panelists, I would like to greet you with due respect. When I was offered to act as the moderator for this occasion, I said yes without thinking, because I have always been proud and pleased to be a part of this process. If you followed the conference last year with my colleague Mustafa Seven, we prepared a book which had the title, If I Want To. It evoked high interest, from karate to football, from musician to robot technologies and law. We focused on girls and young women, and we showed their stories, and I was impressed by their stories in which they really worked hard and overcame all the barriers. Coming back to today, today is the 6th day of the Girl Child Conference. The main theme is being a girl in a changing world. Since the opening, all speakers talked about the pandemic and the ever-increasing effect of climate change. They also talked about the challenges faced by girls and women. The COVID-19 pandemic had social and economic impacts, and it has presented an unprecedented crisis situation for the whole world. We had to face the reality that we are all desperate. Climate change is a disaster. A baby born today is going to live in a world 4 degrees hotter, warmer when that baby is 70 years old, and there will be difficult access to water resources. Disadvantaged children and young people will pay a higher price because they will be the ones that are lagging behind, and after the threat of the pandemic is over, they are going to have the least amount of resources to catch up. We have to say stop to this. Today, in our panel, we are going to listen to important guests who are experts in their field, who are going to help me to discuss the impacts and the solutions. And we are going to express our dream where there's no discrimination, violence, and exclusion for girls. And we will hope that the pandemic and its impact will be over soon. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our panelists. So I hope you will enjoy this panel. The first panelist is Betül Kacar, a leading scientist in molecular biology. Arizona University Molecular and Cellular Biology, works now as an associate professor. Also in World Life Sciences in Tokyo, she is a visiting professor. She has been involved in a coalition at NASA, and also she is offering worldwide support. She's one of the founding members of Saganet. She has been involved in process concerning the discussion of problems faced by girls and solutions thereof. Betül Hanım, hello. The floor is yours. We are now listening to you. Hello. I hope this will be fruitful. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm going to talk about being a scientist today and my projections concerning how girls will be impacted. In the past, when people asked about civilizations, Margaret Mead said that a good hip bone is a sign of civilization. This is a striking answer. How can indication of civilization be a broken and then healed bone of the hip? Because an animal with a broken leg cannot survive. In the we need solidarity. Climate change and pandemic, and these are the developments that are separating us from one another. Some of us consider this as a price that we have to pay for all the digital technologies and everything. So maybe what we have as opportunities may look as if this is a healed hip bone. Well, we have to focus on these from a different perspective. We are facing problems, and there are some thought products in order to help us to survive. However, we have a relatively safe world, and there are a lot of inequalities. If we admit the universal truth, then there is a world with a dichotomy. On the one hand side, we have developed societies. On the other hand side, we have more vulnerable groups, and we have these societies who are in need of assistance. If we want to survive, we have to connect these two groups, and we have to strengthen that connection. Equal opportunities and gender equality education can solve this problem. So how can our lives become easier? First of all, we have to accept that because of the pandemic and the climate change, everybody living in this planet, either developed or underdeveloped the society they are living in, everybody is paying a price. Those who are in the less advantaged groups are more vulnerable. Walking towards the future, the effect of the pandemic is experienced at different levels of resilience. Pandemic may mean taking slower steps. Some of us may feel that they are walking in the swamp, in the mud, but we are all walking next to each other. We are all walking together. Conditions may be tougher for some people, and we are neighboring those people, and we feel that inequality. So what does it mean for the women scientists of tomorrow? Education is a privilege. Not everybody has the same access. I learned that when I was small, and I knew that to break the circle, I had to be well educated. I am at NASA, and I am an astrobiologist, and I am having researchers to get an idea about the roots, and I am leading a team making a lot of researches. Science is not discovering new things. Science is a collective activity. Science helps us to connect to the other researchers, and we have to work with other scientists. In order to build those connections, we need to have comfort. We need to have freedom of travel and other things. Many years ago, I had this comfort, and I took it for granted. And that created an environment for me where I would meet worldwide scientists, world-known scientists in Istanbul. This effect is cumulative. And for girls and for me, these are important things. There are some activities which are cancelled, and as these are accumulated, this will lead to inequalities between children. Girls have fewer resources than boys, and if we cannot manage this inequality, girls will pay a higher price. We need to protect the girls and vulnerable groups. What can we do for that? The norm that will be post-pandemic norm is not going to be the old norms. We have to be prepared. We have to consult the scientists. We have to create equal opportunities for everybody. We need to establish long-term cooperation with scientists, and evidence-based studies should be undertaken. 3, girls should have a respectable childhood period. There has to be good connection with the role models. Dear girls, my dear sisters, since the young ages, we have always been told how we should live a life, and unfortunately, this is the planet we have been living in. There are some ossified thoughts that you have to break in those rooms, in new positions. Maybe you will be the first. Healing a hip bone is not an easy war. You have to take your strength from your precedents. Look for knowledge, create the knowledge, fight for your right to education. Thank you very much. Happy Day of the Girl Child. Thank you very much, Betül Hanım. The second panelist, Dr. Betül Ulukol from Ankara University, Faculty of Medicine in Social Pediatric area. She works as a lecturer, and she is leading the Child Protection Unit in the protection of health of the children. She has had a lot of efforts under the Ministry of Health. She is working as the first reference point, the child monitoring centers, and she has worked as the scientific consultant of Ministry of Health for the establishment of child monitoring centers. Hello, Betül Hanım. Hello. As a pediatric specialist, during pandemic, what can be the child protection risks? Which are the most important? Melis Hanım, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me. This is such a meaningful day, and I really appreciate this opportunity being given to me. I would like to start by saying that children, especially as considering the child as childhood as a period, I also have to tell you that since the very early times in history, if we consider all those years, which has been very poetically described by Betül Hanım, the former speaker, maybe what I'm going to tell you can be considered as words from ordinary life, but starting from early years of history, if you follow this period up, you may come to understand that childhood is vulnerable, physically vulnerable. There are lots of cognitive vulnerabilities because children do not have enough knowledge, enough experience, and all of those turn children and position them as vulnerable. And unfortunately, the track record of history is not very good. Maybe 200 years ago, it was understood that childhood is a very special period and children deserve a lot of things. They need a lot of positive and supportive assistance. And I think this is something that people have come to realize in the past century. Having said that, we know that after Rights of the Child, Convention of the Rights of the Child, after that being widely acknowledged and ratified, people who are dealing with the children have also come to realize that childhood period is an important period. Children have some rights, and we have to open this up for them, and we have to inform the children about their rights, which is also very important. Unfortunately, however, these vulnerabilities are still ongoing. During the pandemic, I, as a doctor, as a part of my job, I have seen a lot of things which are bleeding my heart. So we are attaching more importance, more value to children. We are supporting them. But in the meantime, there are natural disasters, pandemic, and wars, and all of these unwanted situations contributing to the vulnerabilities. Usat Hanım explained very well in the beginning. I don't need to repeat what she has stated, but we know that vulnerable groups in crisis situations like the pandemic, there are devastating effects of the climate change, and there are a lot of things that are brought about by the pandemic. So these crisis situations have a deep impact on vulnerable groups, and in those vulnerable groups, girls are far more vulnerable because the gender perspective positions them as more vulnerable. That vulnerability had a bigger impact on them, bigger impact on the girls, bigger impact on the women. So the burden of the pandemic broke them further, devastated and overwhelmed that further. And that is how it looks. And there's also another thing which one has to mention. I don't want to show you a very pessimistic picture because children have such a big power that cannot be ignored. And I also want to talk about, beyond all those vulnerabilities, the powers that children have. What are their strengths? We know that children are less strong than an adult physically, or in terms of cognition, or in terms of knowledge. They can be a little behind compared to adults, but they have a very high adaptive, flexible capability. This positions them in a different context. So, in the womb of a mother, when they didn't know how to live, with some compassion and with some interest, they turn into creations which can shape the world. So this is the power of the children, which we should enable them to exercise. Being a child does not mean being weak. Being a child does not mean being less powerful. So being a child means a potential, and we as the adults should use this potential. And in the meantime, there's one parenthesis I have to open for girls. This is a big one. Girls' flexibility, adaptability is higher compared to the boys, if you want me to tell you the truth. Boys, girls, they are no different, but I'm sure you know that when an adult is sick, 38 degrees, and then that person has to lie in bed. But when a child has 38 degrees or fever, they can still play on the streets. So they are so much strong. For their future, we need to know very well what we should do to help them for a better future. And I think we need to present the resources of inspiration to those children. Betül Hanım mentioned the meeting in Istanbul where she met a lot of scientists. So we should enable children to have connection with their role models. We need to give them the opportunities to find their role models and connect with their role models. So we need to provide them with sources of inspiration, which is very valuable. Thank you. Thank you very much, Betül Hanım. Now, we have two panels from US and Canada. I will switch to English.
Annie Griffiths, she's one of the first women photographers to worked in nearly 150 countries during her illustrious career. She's worked on dozens of magazine and book projects for National Geographic, including stories on Lawrence of Arabia, Galilee, Petra, Sydney, and Jerusalem. In addition to her magazine work, Griffiths is deeply committed to photographing for aid organizations around the world. She is the founder and executive producer of Ripple Effect Images, a collective of photographers and filmmakers who document aid programs that are empowering women and children in developing countries. Ripple's work has helped 26 nonprofits raise over $10 million. Today, she'll share her observations on the obstacles girls and women face and some empowerment stories. Hi, Annie. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I'm so delighted to be with everyone on International Day of the Girl. It actually is one of my favorite days of the year, and I've celebrated it for years. The reason I love it is because I truly believe that girls are the best investment we can make in our shared future. It's just a fact that girls change the world, and making sure that they are educated and that they are given opportunities is essential to moving a community forward, a country forward, the world forward. So I think it's also important to remember when we're in the middle of so many crises that women are already getting it done. I mean, last week, 2 women won the Nobel Prize for chemistry and physics. And girls are getting it done too. I mean, we know that Greta Thunberg has become probably the most powerful voice for climate change of anyone. And look at Malala Yousafzai and what she did for girls' education. So if we can start the show, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life. I need the guys in Turkey to do it. Well, I'll start anyway while they're getting the show ready. As a photographer for National Geographic, I had an opportunity that very few women had when I began. And I got to travel to 150 countries. I've been to all 7 continents. And along the way, I really saw how beautiful and how sacred this planet is. And so one of the early things that I was focused on was climate change. I just realized that we have this beautiful world and we have to work together to take care of it. And then as time went on, I also had the privilege of working with lots of women and girls because there were so few women photographers that I kind of had the girls all to myself. And I realized that women's stories and girls' stories are just not told as often as men's stories because there aren't that many women photographers. Well, there weren't at that time, but I'm happy to say now there are lots of women photographers, and they are telling these important stories, and they are championing you girls. It was so nice throughout this broadcast to see how many girls and boys have, we're speaking for gender equity. We need you guys, it's the more we work together, the more we get done. And, one of the things that I really advocate for is education. And girls who are educated just have a better life. they marry later, they have fewer children, their families do better, and their kids have a much greater chance of going to school. And they also can achieve economic independence, which is essential, girls. It is essential that you find a way to know that you can support yourself. And the fact is, as communities realize that educated girls lift a village, educated girls lift a country, they lift the world, we all benefit. So something that I think is so important for us to remember in this time of pandemic is that 70% of the healthcare workers are women. We have never needed you more. And everyone, needs to believe in herself and find people around you who believe in you also. So I'm going to give you 3 action steps because I want you girls to get out there and work. The first is fight for your right to be educated. Get angry, get feisty, explain to whoever's standing in your way that this is going to be good for them too, for the community, the village, the country, the world. And during this time when a lot of kids can't go to school, don't stop learning. Read, and write, and learn, and experiment, and do things. Be the creative people that we know you are. The second thing is try to find at least one person who believes in you. Maybe sometimes believes in you more than you believe in yourself. I had that. I had my mom who grew up wanting to be to fly. She loved flight. And in those days, she thought her only option was to become a flight attendant. But in fact, when she went to apply, they said that girls who wear glasses can't be flight attendants. So she became a pilot. And that's my role model. That's, what mom did. So of course she was super supportive of me when I began my career. And the third thing that I want to ask you girls to do is be each other's best friends. When girls work together and when women work together, they can move mountains. So understand that you need to be best friends and promoters of each other. I'm going to finish with a wonderful comment that my girlfriend, who's an astronaut, has been to the space shuttle twice. And she says, when asked about girls in STEM, the rocket ship doesn't care if you're a boy or a girl. So go get them, girls.
Thank you so much, Annie. And our last panelist is Dr. Amber Fletcher. She's Associate Professor of Sociology and Social Studies at the University of Regina in Canada. Her award-winning research examines how gender and social inequality shape the lived experience of climate change through the lens of climate disasters. Influenced by her upbringing, her work focuses on rural and indigenous communities in the Canadian Prairie region. She aims to help amplify the voices of those who are highly affected by climate extremes and to reveal the lived impact of inequality in the context of crisis. Hello, Dr. Fletcher.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
As an academic working on gender and climate change, can you tell us in what ways women and girls are affected by current issues and also what roles they play as leaders of change?
Yes, absolutely. First, let me say it's an honor to be with you today on the International Day of the Girl. And I'd like to express my thanks to the organizers of the event and to all of you for being here today. I also would like to say that I'm joining you today from the province of Saskatchewan in Canada. And our province is located in Treaty 4 territory, which is situated on the territories of several Indigenous nations, the Nahiawak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis. So I'll start by, before getting into some of the dimensions of gender, climate change, and pandemics, I'd like to just take a moment to introduce myself. I'm a professor, a researcher, and a feminist. My work focuses broadly on gender and climate change, and in particular, I examine whether gender and other forms of social inequality make a difference in how people are affected by climate disasters like wildfire, flooding, and drought. And as we know, another disaster, the COVID-19 pandemic, has brought sharp focus to something that feminist scholars like me have been saying for a long time. Crises, whether they're related to the climate, to public health, or to something else, reveal inequality and worsen inequality. So it's important to understand, I think, these social effects as disasters grow increasingly frequent and severe due to global climate change. As countries continue to report record-breaking temperatures, deeper droughts are affecting our ability to produce food and to obtain water, while at the same time increasing the risk of destructive wildfires. Flood events, too, are increasing in severity and threatening our homes, our crops, and our lives. So for me, after conducting hundreds of interviews with women and men who are affected by climate disasters, I have learned this. Disasters are gendered. Major crises like climate change and the current COVID-19 pandemic may affect us all, but they do not affect us all equally. Girls, boys, and non-binary youth are affected differently because their lives are constructed differently. From birth, gender roles and ideologies shape behaviors, access to resources, and future aspirations for girls and boys. Non-binary youth, whose identities challenge the rigidity of gender categories and help to loosen the constraints of gender roles, unfortunately still face the violence of transphobia. Around the world, women and girls continue to be responsible for the majority of household work, such as cleaning and food preparation, which they balance around many other duties at school, at work, and in their communities. They're also largely responsible for giving care to children and others who need support, like the elderly and the ill. So during pandemics, these roles place women and girls at risk of contagion as they care for the sick. In the context of climate change, the work of women and girls becomes increasingly difficult due to droughts when water is scarce. In many countries, women and girls are the main water collectors, often traveling thousands of kilometers each year to bring water to their families, their animals, and their communities. For girls, water scarcity due to drought means more walking, more hauling, exposure to violence, and less time spent in school. When food is scarce, women and girls in the household may eat last, whether due to cultural expectations or self-deprivation to prioritize others. Climate change, therefore, threatens girls' future in more ways than one. Water scarcity not only affects girls' lives in lower-income countries. So here in Canada, which is a high-income country, the rural women I interview have talked about the difficulties of raising children during a severe drought. So they talk about the challenge of caring for babies while spending several hours hauling water each day for the household and the farm. And in some Indigenous societies, women hold sacred roles as water protectors, and girls are taught these roles as well. But drought and flood disrupt their traditional relations with water and reduces access to food and traditional medicines. So despite such challenges, however, Indigenous women, including young women here in North America, are working hard to protect the water against corporate attempts to appropriate it. Recent work conducted by my own research team shows that men are also affected by climate change in gendered ways. Dominant ideas about masculinity continue to suggest that men should be protectors and providers, and boys too are encouraged to be emotionless and stoic in times of crisis. Our research has shown that crises affect men's physical and mental safety. Farm men have described running back into floodwaters to collect personal possessions, and here in the prairie region, men are often seen as the main farmers on their operation. So they are seen as the ones who are responsible for keeping the farm alive. Yet, as crops die due to extreme precipitation and damaging droughts, Ideas of masculinity discourage men from expressing any emotion other than anger, and they limit them from seeking help even in the face of insurmountable challenges. And in Canada, therefore, we have a suicide crisis amongst farm men, and climate change threatens to make it worse. So, disasters are gendered, but it's important to recognize that these roles are not natural for girls or for boys. Both climate change and gender inequality are actionable, not inevitable. I'm inspired by the leadership of young women who are taking a stand for climate justice and demanding action on climate change. In Canada, the US, and the Netherlands, for example, young people are using the legal system to sue their own governments for their right to a future. Boys can challenge gender constructions by supporting the leadership and equality of girls in the climate movement and beyond, by cultivating respect for women, and by recognizing that boys can be active and emotionally engaged caregivers. Non-binary and gender-conforming youth are breaking down barriers every day simply by being who they are, and are demonstrating that gender is a social construction that can problematically affect us all. So I commend the girls, boys, and non-binary youth who are fighting to change the unequal systems and structures that they have inherited but not created. To these change makers, know that so many of us see you, hear you, and we're doing our best to support you. Together, we have the power to change these problems and improve our shared reality. In solidarity, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. Now we have, now I'm switching to Turkish.
Now we have 10 minutes. Actually, the responses should be very short, and I would like to pose you one question. Betül Kacar, the first question goes over to you. For the girls who aspire to be a scientist, what are your recommendations? In addition to that, what is the role of science for the empowerment of girls and young women? Thank you so much. But first of all, now, to be able to exist in science is actually equal to coexist with the other female scientists. In other words, you have to be there in the same environment with the other women scientists, but also who are at your age, you know, who are the same age as you, are very important. So just create friendships with those sisters, I might call them. And this is going to be a lengthy marathon, and it could be simply full of ups and downs, but just do not quit and go and simply continue on your path. And whatever challenge that you are going to simply come across, do not internalize them. Just simply know that there are systemic problems. It's okay, go beyond them, and please, please do a thorough reading of the history of science. Thank you so much. The second question goes to Betül Ulukol. Well, what could be the inspiration for the girls to overcome the challenges and the barriers they might encounter? Well, thank you so much. As an inspiration, we have so many components which could actually act as an inspiration. So we just heard Betül Hanım and the other distinguished speakers who have achieved so many feats in their lives, and they're so full of inspiration. And for the girls, this is actually everything they could simply put their hands on. Everything they watch, everything they touch could be an inspiration for them. So merely, it's not necessarily simply watching some sensational news or the soap operas on the television. At every point which they see anything which could contribute to their development, self-development, personal and professional development. So that's one thing. The second thing is reading. I did take my inspiration from books, from exhibitions, but it could be journals, internet, new media, books. It's actually an unlimited heaven of resources. They might want to make use of that. And I believe more important than all of this, self-trust. It's so important. They are powerful, they are strong, they are enough. And at so many points, they're going to be the leaders, the pioneers of the change, and they're actually the owners of the next step, as long as they trust themselves for a non-violent world, for a world full of scientific success achievements and so many different achievements. They could lead the way. So first of all, they're going to trust themselves, and then whatever they have their hands, their eyes over, they're going to make it simply function as an inspiration tool. I believe today's inspirational stories are going to be very ordinary in the future. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Amber, what do you recommend to parents, families, and decision makers for providing girls and women with opportunities for engagement and for empowerment?
In terms of families, one of the most important things we can do is to teach girls and boys that not only can they be anything, they can choose what they want to be, and to encourage them to have the agency to make those choices, to do whatever we can to ensure those choices exist. And I think that a key part of that begins with teaching girls the things that girls haven't historically been taught. So in the case of climate change, for example, we see that in some cultures it's not considered appropriate to teach girls how to swim. This affects, in a very real way, women and girls' ability to escape a flood disaster. So we need to challenge the things that we've been told are for girls or for boys, and to teach all of the basic skills to all of the children, regardless of gender or sex. I think in terms of policymakers, ensuring that as climate change proceeds and as pandemic crises occur, it's really important to consider gender in our policies and program design. So to make sure that we're considering how the different roles, ideologies, behaviors, expectations shape the manifestation of a policy in real life, and to make sure that policies are always constructed with a gender lens to be as maximally inclusive and beneficial to all as possible.
Thank you. And Annie, what would you recommend to adolescent girls who would like to raise their voices through photography or through other forms of art?
Well, you know, the whole concept of STEM became STEAM because there was a recognition of how important the arts are to, you know, a full education. And I believe that expressing yourself in whatever way works for you is a must. You know, I also loved writing, and I grew up thinking I'd be a writer. But there was something about that camera when I found it, and I realized I could tell stories with images as well as with words. And that's the path I chose. So I think, you know, for girls out there, dance, draw, paint, write, read, you know, express yourself in whatever comes naturally to you. Sing. You can make a difference with anything that you love and that you really are. So don't, you know, we have a saying here, don't put your, you know, put a basket over your candle. Shine and know that the creative side of you is every bit as powerful as other parts of your brain. And just have fun.
Thank you.
Well, distinguished panelists, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for being here, for joining us here, for your precious time. Distinguished panelists simply talked about the negative repercussions on the climate crisis and the pandemic on girls and young women in general, and they also simply emphasized how some probable solutions could simply be effective in terms of playing an effective role, because this is actually having huge and the worst repercussions on women and children, as well as people who are in conflict, the disabled people, the refugees, asylum seekers, and the poor sections of the society. So we simply need this solution for the women, for the youth, and for the girls, and we need to construct a safe future for them. Thank you very much for joining us on this International Day of the Girl 2020. Now I would like to leave the floor to Hazal Kaya, our Master of Ceremony. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and hi again. I believe this is actually a very enjoyable and productive conference. UN Women Turkish Country Director Asya Varbanova is now going to take the floor. Varbanova, the floor is yours.
Partners, dear friends, it is a great pleasure to address you on the occasion of this year's International Girl Child Day at this very exciting online event. We live in a world that is changing very fast, bringing forth new challenges every day. Some of these challenges we did not have to deal with a few years ago or even a few months ago. And at the same time, we need to tackle age-old persistent problems of exclusion, discrimination, inequality, which we have not yet resolved and which have in fact worsened due to the COVID-19 pandemic. These new and old problems that we are discussing today are monumental. The impacts of climate change, health crisis, persistent gender inequalities. Their scale and their complexity requires new solutions. I'm firmly convinced that unless we channel the talents, the energy, the ideas of young people, and particularly of young women and girls, we will not be able to deal with the complex challenges of today, and we will not realize the Sustainable Development Goals. Those that make decisions about the environment, about the economy, about social and health policies need to hear your perspectives and your voices. And this is why we are here today. This conference is one such example. We are here as UN Women to support in making your voices heard, and I'm very glad that together with our long-term partners from the Aydan Dogan Foundation and the UN, UNICEF and UNFPA, we have made this conference a multi-year tradition. Dear friends, this year, 2020, is a historical year for gender equality and women's rights. We're marking 25 years since the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, which today remains the most visionary global agenda for women's rights. 25 years have passed and a lot of progress has been made in a number of areas, such as increasing girls' enrollment in schools, addressing harmful practices such as child marriage, removing discriminatory legislation, and increasing women's participation in leadership and in decision-making positions. And yet, the progress has been not enough and it has been too slow. A lot remains to be done, and there is no country in this world that has achieved fully gender equality. The continued relevance of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action is even more important today because of the significant social and economic impact of the COVID-19 crisis, including increased violence against women and job losses that many women have suffered, which actually puts at risk a lot of the gains that we have made over the past 20 years for the empowerment of women and girls. If we want to achieve the SDGs by 2030, we need to accelerate progress. We need bold steps, not incremental ones. This is the time for disruptors of all ages and of all walks of life. And I salute all of our speakers at today's event who are such disruptors for their passion, for their commitment and leadership to make the change that we need in order for this generation and for the next generation to live in a more resilient, more equal and better world. Thank you very much.
Teşekkür ederiz Sayın Varbanova.
Distinguished Varbanova, thank you very much. well, by 2030, in order to simply pursue and simply realize the Sustainable Development Goals, she emphasized the fact that we need to take bigger and bolder steps. So, from every age and from every walks of life, we need to have creative and entrepreneurship and the simple action of the young people. So now that brings us to the second panel. We're going to have now the panelists, but first our distinguished panelist, Gözde, who is going to be the moderator of this panel, and the young panelists. Hazal, thank you so much. I love you. You know, I'm a big fan. What you are doing in terms of simply contributing to the gender equality. And you're also the mother of a little boy. And what you do actually is means so much. Thank you so much. And now that I was simply talking about that, I have my participants here for quite a long time. I have been either the master of ceremony or the moderator on this International Day of Girl celebrations. Well, but this year is especially important for me because this is the first time that I'm here in front of you as the mother of a baby girl. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists. Dear participants, well, you know, I wish that we were able to simply face one another in a physical venue and environment, but because of the pandemic situation, you know, this is how we are dealing with this. But fortunately, thanks to the technology, now we are able to meet and, you know, talk to and hear great people from all over the world, and they are going to be talking about their activities and simply sharing their experience and opinions through video conferences. The world that we imagine is the title of this panel. The youth will be talking about how they would like to simply put their changing touches on the future, on the world. And as the title suggests, it's going to be to the young people. They will be taking the floor, and they're not random young people. They are the ones who have actually made a change. So I'm not actually putting myself anymore in the category of the youth, but when we were young, every one of us believed that we could change the world. But then, you know, life happens, or because of the priorities, we might be giving up on that thought. But the youth of today, they're more resilient, they're more stubborn in terms of changing the world, changing today, because they're fierce, they're feisty, they're brave, they're bold, and they are actually more aware of the problems, and they have a higher self-confidence. That's why, in terms of shaping a better future, because they have very creative and a very high energy and creative ideas, they are dreaming. They have a dream, and to make that dream happen, they are taking every necessary step. And we have been talking about the fact that it's actually, it's an unprecedented times, and there are some heroes, just like in every turbulent times, and they are training other people so that they could simply be in a position to fight against the prejudices, bias on the same at the same time, and on the other hand, they are also describing the world they would like to live in the future to the world futures, to the world leaders. And this is the message they're sending. We have the power, and do not belittle our power of changing the world altogether. So, before the panel, I got the opportunity to meet them, the panelists that you're going to hear. And just believe me, you're going to be simply seeing that bright spark in their eyes. And now, without further ado, I will be leaving the floor to the panelists, and they have very inspiring stories, and I'm looking forward to this panel. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And I would like to wish you a very enjoyable and productive panel. Well, we have 4 panelists today, but at the same time, we will be also hearing some of the video messages from some of the distinguished panelists. And first of all, I would like to simply get started with the panelists whom I have here. And let's say hi to Shema. Welcome. And Mohammed, if you just allow me, ladies first, how are you doing? Thank you so much. How are you? Thank you very much. So, when I read your story, it really touched me. Well, you were born in a small village, and from the day you were born, you have always had this passion to change the circumstances that you were living in, and you say that you always had that power from day one in you. I think so many people, so many girls are going to be inspired from you. Just please do introduce yourself, and then I'm going to ask you what kind of activities you're involved in. Thank you so much. I'd like to get started. I was born in a very small village, and almost all of the girls in those rural schools are now married and their mothers. And back then, I knew very well that I was not going to end up like that. I had objectives, I had targets, I had things that I wanted to change. And I just did not simply want to have it to myself. I just wanted to simply have a ripple effect and change the other girls. And I was going to do that. But unfortunately, I was growing up in a very simply male-dominated environment, and I knew where to start. Gender equality. I'm Şeyma Nur Sığınç. I'm third-year student in Istanbul School of Law. I was born in 1990. I'm a fellow of Aydın Doğan Foundation 2 years ago, for 2 years, and I'm so glad that I have been able to do so. And I was involved in so many different projects, and I will be talking about that. The Butterfly Effect is the first project. We go to the love houses, and we are simply trying to help and engage the girls who are in the primary and the secondary schools, so that they will discover the real girls in themselves. And we came together, we established the Butterfly Effect. In the current world, gender equality and climate crisis are equally important, two top notions. And Ayşenur Gömbeci, Büşra Fidanoğlu, Çakıl Kaya, and Elif Nur Uygun were my friends, and we developed together the 2 derece project, the 2 degrees project, which is a warning for all of us, because it is no longer a national problem, but it has been a global one. All of the scientists actually claim that they're no longer trying to eliminate this altogether, because it's already too late for that. And as indicated in the Paris Convention, simply they are trying to decrease, simply keep the increase at 1.5 degrees. So if this global warming is elevated by 2 degrees, the world we live in is going to be the past. In the past, most of the creatures and species are going to be extinct, and this is the awareness that we try to create, and that's why we formed such a theme, and under the scope of the project titled 2 degrees. So who are going to be most impacted by this climate change? Unfortunately, women and girls, which is no big surprise. And we have created a number of social media accounts, or we're using different channels and media to raise awareness. As 2 degrees, what are the other things which we did in our lives? So everywhere we go, we always simply try to give the message that single-use plastics are so harmful, and we have to be able to simply use the reusable ones. And we are looking and standing up for our constitutional rights. For example, the right to live in a healthy and balanced environment. So what makes a right useful? That it has to be valuable, because it could be exercised, but it has to be simply brought to an international level. Okay, so what kind of a world would I like to live in? I would like to live in a healthy and balanced environment. So this is the first thing, because it's my right, it's everyone's rights, in a sustainable and colored and a gender-based equality environment. Well, I say colorful, but this is not necessarily related with or equal to the gender or the sex. Well, thank you so much. Well, because of the fact that I have just become a mother, I'm going to be even more emotional, actually, all throughout the panel. Well, you have talked about the fact that you were born in a small village, and I'm sure every girl who is watching you is going to be totally inspired by you. Thank you so much. I also would like to add one thing. Individual awareness is what we really actually factor in as 2 degrees. Please just do not say that, well, what's going to change even if I do that on my own? The San State University conducted a research in the United States, and they are teaching global climate change to 50 students who have been followed for 1 year. At the end of that year, they have simply reduced their carbon emissions by 3,000 tons, which is major. Yeah, even the smallest actions could result to a huge, a major effect. Even one person can move the whole humanity. Thank you so much. Well, before the panel, remember I told you that we will be hearing some of our panelists through their video conferences. There are some activists all over the world, and we will be watching their videos. United Nations Youth Leader and Jumpstart Academy, a young Madel Kanga from Cameroon, a young activist, is now going to share their opinions.
We'll talk about climate change and global pandemics and how they affect girls. And we will discuss ways in which we can eliminate these adverse effects by us, young people. In this event, which is jointly organized by UNICEF, UN Population Fund, UN Women, and the Ayn Duggan Foundation, we will discuss the ways in which climate change and global pandemics affect girls and boys. The problems created by the burden of climate change affect children more. If climate change continues at its current pace, in 20 years, 1 out of 4 children around the world will have difficulty accessing water resources. The negative effects of climate change, forced migration, and disasters make girls more vulnerable to dropping out of school and to poverty. The COVID-19 outbreak is not only a health crisis, it is a social and an economic crisis, affecting disproportionately women and girls and further deepening inequalities based on gender. We urge you to assume responsibility in fighting the adverse effects of climate change for our children and for our world. Join us and take responsibility for the empowerment and protection of girls in a world shaped by the pandemic.
Well, that was Madeline, and now, following Shema, I would like to simply continue with Mohammed. Mohammed, welcome. I would like to welcome you. And I told you when I first met you, I think your presence here as a man, you're going to be an inspiration for the other boys to stand up for the rights of the young women and girls. Thank you so much. And Madel talked about the pandemic period, and I would like to now pose you questions about that. Well, hi everyone. I'm Mohammed Aktaş. I'm a second-year student in Istinye University, the International Relations, School of International Relations, and I'm also a part of this program on the Child Rights Volunteers Association, and I'm very happy to be a part of that, and I'm going to get started how I was involved in the first time. When you're talking about the children rights committees, that is actually a milestone in my life by the Ministry of Family and UNICEF. They are coordinated. Actually, one of the very unique and great examples. Since 2000, they are active in Turkey. You know, it is based on volunteering between the ages of 12 and 18. So it doesn't matter, girl, handicapped, disabled, boy or girls. They could be members of these committees. So once we reach the age of 18, as we call it, we are retiring. And once we are getting retired, this is the CHOHAK, or the Child Rights Volunteers Association starts. That's where we continue our activities. And the basic principle of child rights committees is the equality between girls and boys. There is a president in every city, and there are 10 girl, 10 boy members, and as the country coordinators, they are co-presidents. So one girl, one boy president per each country. Let me give you a solid example. It was the 30th anniversary for the International Declaration on Children's Rights, and there was an invitation from New York, and back then I was the country coordinator with my friend, and we went there and we delivered the speech in New York. It was significant. Out of 192 member countries, we were the single country which both sent a boy and a girl country coordinator. And there is this misconception who could establish an association. Well, I believe majority of our viewers are children. So every child can establish an association once they are 15 without any support from an adult. They're free to establish or found their own association. And every child who has completed their age 12 can be a member of those associations. So we were just talking about the fact that every unprecedented time has their own heroes, and you are one of those heroes for me. So within the scope of your activities, or throughout the pandemic, what were the adaptation steps that you have taken? Well, actually it has been, as you have said, it was new, something we have not seen before, and we are one of the rare associations which were able to adapt very fast to this. So every physical activity very fast simply were brought to the online environment using the technology. The process which started in March, and starting from the initial weeks of April, we just did an analysis, a situation analysis. So first of all, we started the debriefing webinars, and the participants were from the ministries, from UNICEF, and from the relevant institutions and organizations. And in our consultation meetings, we focused on how to continue this process and what the children should do. We also simply did debriefing for the children, and actually this helped us to increase our cooperation and collaboration with UNICEF. And since the start of the pandemic, as an association, in an online environment, we have been collaborating with UNICEF, and within the scope of these activities, the children who are staying at home, simply how to browse internet safely, how to simply spend one day, and how to simply boost their self-development are some of the titles that we have been focusing on. Is there any last message that you would like to add? Well, I would like to talk about this remote education and training process. When we look at the remote education, well, I'm a college student, and all of a sudden I ended up actually in this remote education environment, which has its own ups and downs, so to say. So EBA TV and Web EBA are some of the applications which are used for the children. And in the upcoming times, I believe, by the Ministry of National Education, rather than the open high schools or the remote high schools, they should simply adapt to it something else, because, there are both boys and girls who are lacking some technological tools. So this remote educational system should be improved further and continued on a sustainable basis. So the government, the state, should make sure that there are equal rights simply exercised by the boys and girls, tablet, internet connection, broadband, with whatever it takes to simply ensure that it should be offered by the government. And last but not least, I would like to simply share some of the tips and some mottos. So think freely and share what you believe. So know that you are free and feel that freedom. That's why in the group works, we are told to simply think freely and share that whatever you have in your mind freely with the rest of the group. Otherwise, we are going to be rather limited in terms of creating new ideas. That's why we need to increase the number of environments where the children could freely express themselves, and adults should be educated in that respect. It is one of the most essential development criteria for a society, which is very much equal to the respect they have for the children. So from love to passion or to compassion, it is the duty of the adults to offer these to the children. And I believe I hope every child will continue their lives in a safe and loving environment. And we're going to simply have the Q&A at the end of this panel, and I believe, our friends have so many questions. I'm going to just also give you the floor again, but as I've told you before, there are some video conferences of some of our panelists. And like Mohammed, we have another friend who has established iChild, Zeynep Betül Demirses, and she is going to simply share, she will be sharing her message with us.
Dünya Kız Çocukları Günü'nde kız çocuklarına yönelik ayrımcılığın, dışlamanın ve şiddetin olmadığı bir dünya için bir araya geliyoruz. Küçük bir kasabada katılım hakkından bir haber yaşarken çocuk komiteleriyle tanışıp bugün diğer çocukların katılım haklarını savunan ve bunu geliştirmek için çabalayan kadın bir aktivist olarak belirtmek isterim ki kadınlar kariyerleriyle, görüntüleriyle, tutkularıyla, istedikleri ve istemedikleriyle vardır, tamdır ve var olmaya devam edeceklerdir. İsteseniz de, istemeseniz de. Biz buradayız. Akademide, sporda, sanatta ve sokaklarda. Kısacası nerede olmak istersek oradayız. En güzel kahkahalarımızla. Kadınlar yeniden doğuracaklar kendilerini. Yakında. Hem de çok yakında.
Zeynep'in de
So we shared message from Zeynep with you. So we have two panelists with us physically present, but we have internet connection with two panelists who are not physically here, but they are here virtually in order to share with us their thoughts and ideas. I'd like to start with Selin first. Selin, can you hear me? Are you there? Hello, Gözde Hanım. I can hear you well. Hello, Selin. You're a climate activist, and there are lots of young people following us and watching this live stream, and they don't know about you. So you define yourself as a climate activist. Can you please explain to them who are you and what are you doing? Yes, of course. First of all, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. It is a source of pride for me. My name is Selin Gören. I graduated from Robert College, and I'm a university student, just like Betül Kaçar. I would like to study biology, and I am a climate activist in Fridays for Future. So I would like to share with you a film, Dystopia, which you have never watched. There are fires, there are floods, and there are earthquakes. There are climate extremes. The glaciers are melting. The sea levels are increasing, flooding a lot of land. Ecologic diversity has disappeared. There are no bees, no bears, and no starfish. We lose these species. So there are social impacts as well. So in this dystopia, the socioeconomic level is very low in some groups, and these groups are the most vulnerable, and they are the least causes for this. And they have to pay the price of greedy people who caused the crisis. And girls have been impacted the most by this crisis. Their access to education is getting much more difficult. They have to care for their siblings. They have to work at the farm. They have to cook for all the other members of the family. They are trapped in homes and they cannot go out. When they grow, the situation does not change much. They did not have access to education, and they were not aware of their potential. And these young women, during the climate migration, are exposed to violence, both physically and psychologically. So this is so scary, and there's a lot of injustice in this movie, right? So in the past, we would watch these movies in big theaters eating popcorn. We would say this is science fiction, and we would, in a way, enjoy it. We would say it was really thrilling. We would say this would never come true. This would never be our lives. But in one day, we started losing 150 different live creatures. Amazon forests burned down, and Ankara Polatlı, the sandstorm, was experienced. And simultaneously, we started witnessing a lot of disasters across the world, and we realized that this is called not a dystopia but climate crisis. We are young people and generations after us and all living creatures who consider world as a home. Our future depends on whether we'll be able to solve this problem or not. We as young people, we are aware of this. This crisis is not something that we can watch at home, or this is not something we can post a story with a crying face. For our future, we have to intervene actively in this scenario. That's why I'm a climate activist, and there are a lot of young people like me. There are hundreds of thousands, there are thousands of young people, hundreds of thousands across the world, and thousands of young people in Turkey working for this. So Fridays for Future is the name of this initiative. 6 strikes for climate have been organized so far. Our purpose is to draw attention of decision makers to this climate crisis and to persuade them to take action. There is only one way to reverse this, and we need everyone in our efforts. Just our young people are not enough. We need people from all backgrounds, from all professions, and they need to activate their capabilities to solve this crisis. It's never too late to find a solution. Sometimes, in order to create a future that we can live in, we all need brave and strong women. Let's rewrite this dystopic scenario so that it will not be a dystopia. Thank you. Thank you very much for the messages that you have provided, that you've given. I would like to ask you, you talked about strikes, and how did you organize these during the pandemic? Yes, during the pandemic, we had a lot of difficulty organizing these strikes. We had to reformulate them. However, we made them online, and fighting against the climate crisis, while we were trying to solve the pandemic, the climate crisis doesn't wait for us. That was the message. And we organized online activities. We had webinars using Zoom on the 3rd of April. We organized a virtual activity, Instagram live streams, and some singers gave concerts to help us, and that was the kind of climate strike we organized, and it was a good experience during the pandemic. And after the pandemic, we'll be out on the streets, and we are looking forward to carrying our messages. Thank you very much. That's what we hope, as soon as possible. Thank you very much. As I said to my friends, I'll come back to you for the Q&A. And there is another message recorded, this time from Raina Ivanova from Germany, UN Rights of the Child Committee member. She has a message for us.
Hi, my name is Raina, and I'm a 16-year-old climate and child's rights activist from Germany. Today is a very important day for me and girls all over the world because we come together and celebrate each other and raise awareness for the challenges we face due to our gender. In face of climate change, we are all affected, but this does not mean that we are affected equally. Women and girls who already face inequality and discrimination due to their gender are affected way more than anyone else when climate disasters strike. Thus, UN figures show that 80% of the people who are displaced by climate change are women. Furthermore, social structures in some countries make it very difficult for girls to obtain a basic education. This puts them behind those who have the opportunity to an education and starts the cycle of inequality. Girls' safety, health, education, and their opportunities have always been at risk, but when additionally facing climate disasters, the challenges they face are multiplied. In many ways, we see that the daily challenges we face because of climate change are way more significant when it comes to girls. So I'd like to ask you to stand up for the girls and women in your environment and help us bring more equality to our world. Because discrimination and violence against women can be found everywhere, and we all need to take part in making our world a more equal place. Thank you for listening to me, and happy day of the girl child.
Almanya'dan mesajımızı da aldık.
So, thanks for the message from Germany. We have one more panelist who's going to be with us virtually, not physically, Dağlar Çilingir. Hello, Dağlar. Welcome. Hello. Hello, hello. Thank you very much. You watched the speakers before you, and you listened to them. And if you want to give us some messages, you're free to do so. We know that you are helping young people to have better access to health, and you are working to improve their right to health, and you are working with different groups of young people, especially with girls. Please introduce yourself and talk about what you have done so far. Hello. Hello, everybody. I'm really very happy to have this opportunity. My name is Dağlar. I am the health and training coordinator of an association for the health of young people. But 7 years ago, for 7 years, this is my 7th year, I have been working in sexual health and reproductive health. So I have been involved in the provision of trainings under the system we call as peer-to-peer training. Today, as you rightly said, during the pandemic, especially young people, girls and women, what they have been through is something we have to think about. So let's imagine what they are going through. Let's imagine someone who is called Neşe. I'll introduce you to Neşe. Neşe graduated from high school. She worked really hard, and due to the pandemic, it was a lot of stress on her, and she could be placed in a teaching department in a university. But unfortunately, she's a little bit sad. I'm going to talk about why. Because during this period, the family had some difficulty in making ends meet, and the family received some benefit during the pandemic. So Neşe's computer is broken, and they don't have the family does not have the budget to fix it. In addition to that, they have problem paying the bills, including the internet bill, and Neşe is probably going to use the mobile phone and be able to use the package, but she's a little bit stressed whether that internet package of the mobile provider will be enough. And since childhood, Neşe has felt that her mother has not been well respected inside the family, and she fears the same fate will find her. So during the pandemic, all family members are home, and the tension is increasing inside the family. Sometimes they are physically pushing each other, and sometimes they are increasing their voices, and there are big fights inside the family. Therefore, Neşe is concerned about her security as well. And since her childhood, there is period problem, menstruation period problem. Sometimes she has a very bad stomachache, and she decided to go to the doctors, but all of a sudden there was this pandemic, and it was not welcome to speak such things on inside the family. So she tries to help herself when she has pain in the abdomen. So given the situation at home, on the other hand side, Neşe heard from the news that young people are the sources of the pandemic. So the young people are communicating the disease. So she's blaming herself socially. So she's home, not feeling secure, but there is this blaming by the whole society. She doesn't know what to do. So maybe this is the year she's supposed to be most excited, but she's sad. So if Neşe were a refugee, if Neşe were a disabled person, if she were a girl who was born and raised in a village, if she were a girl who was married by force at an early age, what would she go through? Neşe is only one of those young people in Turkey. So she's experiencing life as a young woman, and she can be the voice of many of us, because what she's been through is depicting what many of you have been through. So I was thinking what we should do. how can we solve the problems of Neşe with some little action? How can Neşe be a part of not the problem, but the solution? And of course, I have to consider all of you while describing the story of Neşe. Let's consider if Neşe had uninterrupted internet, if she had access to digital technologies, Neşe would be able to continue her education and she will be able to work hard so that she would have hope for the future. And if Neşe had a room of her own, maybe she would look at NGOs' websites, public bodies' websites, so that she would have access to the services offered by these entities. She would be able to call her friends and share what she is going through, and she wouldn't feel that much alone. Well, of course, immediately we think about, I wish Neşe had been trained concerning sexual education and reproductive education, then Neşe would feel more self-confident and would know that talking about menstruation is not wrong, it's not a taboo. If we had healthcare professionals who could speak the same language with Neşe, if Neşe was able to receive services, she wouldn't be too much concerned about the pain during the menstruation, and she would be able to take some important action that she had to take, and she would feel more secure. Well, of course, a lot of those are not limited to the pandemic. In the pandemic, all of those increased, but I'm going to talk about something of a larger scale. I wish we had more NGOs for the youth, and I wish that they could have more access to funds by the public authorities so that they could be stronger. And then in topics such as menstruation and sexuality, there would be more opportunities in which young people could gather, identify the problems, and then solve those problems altogether through a collective discussion. Indicated by Luisa and also indicated by Selin, we are not imagining a world where young people work only. The support by adults is crucial for young work. Well, of course, the young people should be included in decision-making and also in other activities. They can take responsibility for elderly care or for other social issues, but it is important for young people to work together and to share with each other their experience. We, as young people, we are ready to be a part of the solution. I would like to make a call to adults, our parents, and then our teachers, then healthcare providers, NGOs, public authorities, and UN agencies. There are lots of international organizations, and all adults in the field of education should open up the ways for us. They should hold our hands. They should empower us, guide us, and show us the way so that we can strengthen our cooperation with them. This is what we hope. Thank you very much for listening to me. We are hopeful and we are expecting more cooperation to come. Thank you very much, Dağlar. So the last minute of your message was really like a guidebook for adults. We have one more video message, and that is related to what you have stated from Kosovo, Eglantina Avdiu. So she works for and she has established Generation United, working for young people with Down syndrome. So let's listen to Eglantina.
The effects of climate change are already destructive and will only grow stronger and more widespread over the next decades. And not a single individual is spared from its consequences. But people in already unequal positions, such as girls, women and children, are at a heightened risk. They also have the least opportunities to protect themselves from and adapt to the impacts of this ecological crisis. The negative impacts caused by climate change, such as forced migration, poverty and disasters, make girls more vulnerable against violence, child marriage and dropout. The unequal treatment of girls is a violation of human rights, and it must be stopped. Girls' chances to gain an education and to decide on their own lives are key factors in the context of addressing global issues, including climate change, because they're not only victims. They're also stakeholders, leaders, and actors producing change. So providing them with opportunities to learn, make decisions, and a chance to come up with strategies to make a difference on their own lives and their communities will undoubtedly break the barrier of gender norms and help women thrive in the challenges posed by this crisis. We urge you to assume responsibility in fighting the adverse effects of climate change.
Tüm panelist arkadaş, tüm
I would like to thank all the panelists, and I also would like to thank all the panelists who sent us their video messages. So we will have Q&A for 10 minutes, and we are going to receive questions from all those following us on live. We have both boys and girls who are following us, so I'm looking forward to their questions. So I'm going to communicate those messages and questions to our panelists, and we will try to reply to those. Hanife Toker, I can see not a question, but shared her best wishes with us. So, and Bahar Toksoy told a story from a village in the previous panel, and I went through the same, Hanife Toker says. Strong young people, young minds should be supported. So empowered girls, empowered futures is the message. Thank you very much for your message. So this is exactly the same what we are trying to convey through this event. So I also would like to look at another question. This was discussed in the past panel. So I will communicate this, but I don't want this to be limited. So Selin Dalar, you can hear me as well. If you want to take the floor to answer, please talk about this, because this is for all the panelists. As a woman, when you feel like you're going to give up on everything, what do you need as a motivation to continue? So Sheima, do you want to say something? Because your messages are very valuable, I think. Well, I experience this situation only rarely because I am very determined. I decide something and I do it because I did not have a very good childhood. It was really very difficult. So myself, my family, my friends, the whole world, I want to present a better world to everyone. I'm trying to do my best and I'll continue doing my best. So when I feel like giving up on everything, I motivate myself thinking about my ambition to change the world. Selin Dağlar, do you have anything to add, or I can ask you the other questions? Very quickly, I can add something. As a climate activist, as climate activists, we have friends across the world. Luisa also delivered the message during the first panel. When I feel like I'm giving up on everything, I am motivated by other young people because they are ambitious and they are passionate about our goals, and we can achieve things together. And in Turkey, we could achieve a lot of things. I have a lot of friends who are supporting me all the time. And when I feel a little bit down, my friends and their strength motivate me. So acting together is the common message. Dalar, anything to add? I'm going to tell you something similar. I'm motivated by other women and also my team members because they continue the fight and they find that strength to continue the fight. So whenever I feel down, I am motivated by them so that I can keep going. So another question to Mohammed. Mehmet Ali Sert is asking the question. Thank you very much. Girls and boys, how much can they make their voices heard? And do you think officials are sensitive about this? Mehmet Ali, thank you very much. Mehmet Ali is one of the members of our committee in Çanakkale. I would like to give you some examples, and these are real-life examples. I talked about Child Rights Committee. Every year, on the 20th of November, we organize a panel. This year, we will organize the 21st, and as a result, a report is prepared by children without intervention of any adult. There is a declaration prepared by children on the 20th of November every year, and this is submitted to the Speaker of Parliament and other officials in the Parliament of Turkey, and these are the requests of children. And there are two things which have been realized at the Parliament. Last year, the Subcommission of Rights of the Child has been opened last year. This is very important for the rights of the child because children can directly refer to this, and there are 7 MPs working for the rights of the child at the Parliament right now. It is important because 4 years ago at the Child's Forum, when I was writing things with my colleagues, we were only wishful thinking. But 4 years later, the subcommission has been established at the Parliament. And last year was the year to fight against child labor. And that was a year of mobility. So what we wrote was, in 81 provinces, we wanted the government officials to open the help desks to fight against child labor. And today at New York, we delivered a speech, and children delivered a speech in New York, and we are one of those 2 countries which delivered a speech. So this country values what children have to say. Thank you very much. Well, you said that small things can change the world. So Zeynep Ayna asked a question related to that. Climate change and fight against climate change. As individuals, what can we do? So I will give the floor to Selin later on, but first to you, Şeyma Nur. I can tell you a lot of things you can do immediately. I can give you examples. We have disposable plastics, and we got rid of them in 1 day. Especially, please do not leave your chargers plugged in forever, because once they are plugged, they start consuming electricity. You can use metal containers for water instead of plastic bottles. So this helps you financially, and recycling of that plastic takes a long time, and it survives in nature for a long time. And about clothes, buy what you need only, because tons of water is spent while producing only 1 pair of trousers. So these are the immediate things, very simple things, right? Yes, I have not been able to implement them, but I'm really ashamed. I promise I'll do what you say. So Selin, I am sure that you will also give us some tips. Addition to what Şeyma said, because individually there are really these things and a lot of things that we can do. This crisis is such a big crisis that, as we previously indicated, with individual efforts, we cannot solve it completely, unfortunately. Therefore, we need a collective action. And as I indicated in my speech, we need professionals from all areas. We need to listen to scientists. Of course, you don't need to be a climate activist. You don't need to invest all your time in this. Of course, as an individual, you can do a lot of things. Exercising your profession based on your knowledge and experience, there are things you can do. An artist has things she can do. A teacher has things to do. Explaining to children what it's all about, the climate crisis. A doctor, a scientist, they all have things to do for fighting against the climate crisis. So I think all people should do their best and get engaged in collective action. Our action is one example for that, but there are lots of climate actions, and please support strikes for climate. Dağlar, one last sentence from you to strengthen the message. Well, let's not lose our hope. Never give up your hope. And of course, this is a message not only for women, but all members of the society. We should support each other, and especially women should act in solidarity. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your messages. It has been really valuable in this panel for half an hour. And I hope that the viewers found it inspiring too. So I hope that next year we'll see each other, we'll be in the same room, and next year on the 11th of October, we'll be together again talking about a more positive scenario. Thank you very much for participation. Thank you very much for watching us. So I would like to give the floor to Hazal Kaya as the moderator. Thank you.
Well, this great panel and your kind remarks before the panel, thank you so much. And it's actually very a great feeling for me to be sharing the stage with you. Well, we have also told you at the beginning of the conference that we have received specially made videos from celebrities for today. Hello, my name is Eda Erdem. I'm the team captain of Turkey Women National Volleyball Team and Fenerbahçe Opet Volleyball Team. Today is 11th of October, which is International Day of the Girl. We have gathered here today to end discrimination against girls and to defend their rights. COVID-19 and the pandemic and the climate change is changing the world, and women and girls who are featured are among the ones who are mostly affected by these ever-changing conditions. Girls can't access distance learning due to economic and technical reasons. They're overwhelmed with domestic and care responsibilities. They're deprived of sports, art and social activities, and thereby physical and emotional development. They become more vulnerable against violence, early and forced marriage. COVID-19 pandemic has shown us how vulnerable we could be in this respect. We all have duties and responsibilities to help the recovery process. Not just governments, but all of us as sports institutions, the athletes, sponsors, media organizations should draw attention to the problems of women and girls. We should take their needs into consideration at all times. We, as women volleyball players and sultans of the net, try to be the source of inspiration simply with our character, which never gives up, stands firm and always fights to win, and dedicate our every success to girls and young women, because we can only build a resilient society by bringing up healthy and strong generations. We urge you to assume responsibility to support, protecting, and empowering girls in today's world changing with crisis. Hello, this is Tuğçe. I'm 20 years old, university student. I define myself as an activist for climate change and animal rights. Okay, could you please tell us your story? Why are we here today? At the age of 15, we went to Marmaris for a vacation. There was a water course spilling to the sea where I was staying. And I saw people fishing alongside the water course. And at that time, there was a campaign of an international environmental SCO. The campaign was aiming prevention of fishing small fish, which was the title of the how long is your fish. I was quite aware of the fact that if there are no small fish, there were no big fish, and I warned them. And on the following days, I was actually a small girl and no one cared about me. And they were not listening to me. They were not even responding to me. And I simply decided to put up a protest. And I was going to make a press statement. And in order to simply make my sound or voice heard, I go and knock the doors of media institutions. And all throughout the water course, I put up simply small slogans. Don't add my small words with your big fish, fish horn. And there were so many people. I was reading a statement, my hands were trembling. And while I was making the press statement, I was shouting, that is, those adults are making a massacre here in the sea. The cameraman was shooting them. And the fisherman moved away. That's how my protest worked, actually. And it was a successful action. And I took that anger and I simply took it to an organized action. When I simply returned to my city, national and international CSOs working for environment. That's where, that's how I started to be an activist. Supporting the child rights committees based in 81 provinces, as well as institutions and organizations working with and for girls. When it's a family-related problem, we can raise awareness and create more opportunities for girls by creating more social responsibility projects in the field, by raising awareness of families, perhaps, or increasing the number of activities organized for girls. The participation rights of girls can be improved by providing parents with adequate education. Girls can improve their participation rights, joining the provincial child rights committees affiliated with the Ministry of Family, Labor and Social Services. Now, many women and girls have been exposed to cyber violence during the pandemic period. Hate speech, unauthorized access to others' computer or mobile phone, identity theft, online stalking, verbal or visual threats are all types of cyber violence. In the time of pandemic, our safety and health are not all about protecting ourselves from the viruses. Internet use is among our essential rights. Safe internet should be rendered accessible to all of us. Online concrete mechanisms should be established so that when people are exposed to cyber violence, they could seek remedies. Association for Solidarity with Asylum Seekers and Migrants. Refugee children call for education, healthcare, gender, and overcoming challenges at the time of the pandemic. If we are healthy, we get to be hopeful. If we are hopeful, we will have everything. Do not let the language barrier deprive you of your health. As children, we will overcome challenges with your support to education. The pandemic broke out when I had just begun to learn Turkish. We would like to keep learning the language and attending classes from home. Turkish is not our native language. Remember that. And please show tolerance to us as we try to have access to the accurate information. We too deserve a private space at home. School is not a privilege for us. Please help us go to school. We should study rather than be involved in household chores. The biggest barrier is the obstruction of our right to education. Our fathers and older brothers too should do the chores and take care of our siblings. Let's not allow the coronavirus to be a barrier. Let's play games and let's go to school all together. A thermometer to take our temperature should be around home. As children, we love two things more than anything else: school and playing games. Give us a chance. Well, welcome once again, and this brings us to the end of our International Day of the Girl Child Conference. October 11th is a very special day. However, we were here together to remind you that the obstacles faced by girls and women are not only special for just one day and that there is so much to be done. We hope that our posts and messages have helped raise awareness on this issue. We wish each message to be a hope for the future, and the inequalities created by climate change and global pandemics will be reset as soon as possible. In a struggle, we must all stand by and support girls, because strong girls mean strong futures. On behalf of Aydın Doğan Foundation, UNFPA, UNICEF and UN Women, I would like to thank everyone for their participation. See you once again on Healthy Days. Goodbye.